Alright, hello everybody. Today I am going over Warhammer, the Old World, the RPG, the basic rules. So this is a new system from Cubicle 7. I tend to like Cubicle 7 systems, and I like a lot of what they do. I've been playing a lot of Warhammer Fantasy 4th Edition with my players. In the past, I have also played Soulbound. Um, So I was interested in this system. I wanted to pick it up and I wanted to see what they had to do with it. So on the splash screen here, the default setting is around Talabheim, and it's in this town, Talagad. It's a really crummy port town. I've read through it. Looks like an interesting setting. So the purpose of this video is to try to give you an overview of the rules, so you can understand if this is a system you're interested in. It's also for my players who don't actually have access to the rulebook. We are playing online, so it's just to give them a better grasp of what's going on rules-wise. So let's get started. So the basic system is it's like a D10 dice pool system. So your characteristic, that's talking about your strength, your weapon skill, your agility, dictate the number of dice in your pool, and the skill that you're testing against, like melee, shooting, toil, athletics, is the number that dictates your success level. And these are essentially, you have to roll your skill level or under. So if your athletics is 3, each die that rolls like a 3 minus a 1, 2, or a 3 is a success. So I know I put an example here, but if we look at the left, the first example is I've got weapon skill 2, melee 3. That's not going to be uncommon for starting characters. You might increase both of those by 1. Weapon skill you only increase if you get lucky. Melee you have more latitude over, but you shouldn't be able to start much higher than 4. So because we have 2 weapon skill, we roll 2d10. Anything that's a 3 or less is a success. So in this example, we get 1 success. Ballistic skills 2, shoot 3. We're shooting at somebody. We don't have any bonuses or penalties. We roll 2 dice because we have ballistic skill 2. However, we get 0 successes because we rolled 2 4s. Strength 3, toil 2. We roll 3 dice because it's strength 3. Toil is only 2, so nothing's a success, not even the 3. If you're not familiar with D10s, the 0 represents a 10, so that is certainly not less than 2. Now, agility 4, athletics 3. We roll 4d10 again. Because of our agility, our main characteristic is 4. The skill is 3, so anything that is 3 or less is a success. And you see here we have 1 success on our agility test. If you only get 1 success, it will result in a complication. If you get more than 3 successes, you'll get a boon. These are mostly narrative, and it's kind of up to your DM. The book gives you examples of successes and boons. For opposed tests, whoever gets the most successes wins. If it's a tie, the initiator of the check wins, as long as somebody got at least 1 success. In this case, if it was a tie, they'd both have got 1 success. What that means is that if I'm attacking somebody, I win ties so long as I got at least 1 success. If I'm trying to persuade somebody, I've persuaded them as long as I get at least 1 success. But also keep in mind that that's going to result in in some kind of a problem or some kind of a complication. So that's the basics of rolling. I put a note on my handwritten sheet of paper. So Cubicle 7, and this is a Warhammer Fantasy thing. You could do extended tests, which is you have a target number of successes you need to hit, and you can roll a number of times until you get those successes. In this case, they call them exacting tests, and there's a cost associated with the rerolls. It's something that actually is supposed to have value in the circumstances, like time. It'll be a significant unit of time for an extra roll, something that hinders the characters or causes a problem, or a cost. Um, it might drain their resources in some other ways, but that's just something to keep in mind that for extended tests, there is some kind of cost. So movement, this is a big deal. I've used the official example here. So normally, this is a zone movement. I first used it in Age of Sigmar Soulbound. I liked it in that system. So you divide the battlefield up into zones. The dotted lines in this case are the different zones. A player can move at a normal speed. Creature, players and most everything else, can move one zone for free. As far as I know, there's no way to prevent movement outside of narrative. Like, this cliff is too high for you to scale, right? You can add hazards into the zones as the DM. So, like, let's say L here, who has just charged these Ungors. So there's an obstacle here of a little cliff. So your DM will probably require an athletics check to actually climb up and engage the Ungors. Because the Ungors are specifically on the cliff. And that could be established narratively. In this case, it's drawn in such a way that it's clear that the Ungors are on the cliff. So you'll notice there's a path here, and there are trees and obstacles, but for the most part, their placement is completely irrelevant, and the placement of the tokens is almost completely irrelevant. The only reason why token placement matters is you'll see B and BG. They're considered to be in close range, so they're in close combat. Same thing with L fighting these Ungors, because he is adjacent to them, or he's directly touching. It's letting everybody know that he's in close range. So you can use an action to sneak. So you'll do a stealth check, and if there's cover, so A has a lot of trees around him. It wouldn't really matter if A's token was all the way over here in the open. If he succeeds his sneak, then you could just place him in the trees, or it's presumed that he's hiding in some of this cover and concealment as far as the trees are concerned. Again, exact placement doesn't matter for zones. It's just more narratively what's going on. So we would just say he's hiding behind the trees. And his next attack would be unopposed, because nobody knows that his attack's coming. So Another is to avoid hazards. You can use your action, and you only get one action. So any of these things mean all you're doing your turn is moving other free actions or what these movement actions. So if A sneaks, he's not attacking this turn. He's just going to sneak, get behind cover, and next round he can potentially shoot. Avoiding a hazard, there may be traps or something else dangerous in the zone that lets you avoid that. Move an extra zone is just it's just a run. Then charge, you can move an extra zone. My understanding, the way I read that, that's on top of your free movement, so you could potentially move 2 zones. And you get +1 dice on your subsequent attack. Running or charging, not changing, but charging an extra zone, you can do by testing your athletics. If you failed, you get staggered. I'll explain stagger in a little bit. So combat, if anything you would expect to be a free action is a free action. The one thing that's not a free action is picking like your weapon up off the ground if you were disarmed. But drawing, sheathing, knocking an arrow, shouting, yelling, talking, moving, that's all free actions. So the attacks are generally opposed, and athletics represents a dodge. So generally, if somebody's aware of you, they can pretty much always oppose with their athletics. So athletics is like your primary defensive stat, agility, athletics. If you're in melee and you have an appropriate weapon, you can oppose with defense. That represents a parry, and that's a weapon skill defense. So if you happen to have a good weapon skill on a character, then defense is probably better. But the stats, a lot of that's going to depend on you randomly roll bonuses to your stats at the beginning of the game, and you can upgrade them later with experience, and certain classes have favored skills which get a reduced experience cost. But back to it. I'm going to go through my example here. So we have a player character with weapon skill 2 and melee of 3. Okay, so he rolls 2 dice, and anything that's a 3 or less is a success. In this case, he got 2 successes. His target is going to try to dodge him. So he makes an agility 3, athletics 3 test. In this case, he gets 1 success, his 3 that he rolled. The player character is going to hit the opponent with 1 success. The player character's strength is 3, and he's using a sword to hit, and the sword is just equal to his strength and damage. He gets 1 extra damage because he happened to have gotten an extra success in excess of what the opponent had. If the opponent's defense is greater than 4, meaning he's got a defense of like 5, 6, 7, nothing happens to him. He's completely, the blow hit, but it just wasn't enough to actually hurt him. And I said defense, I mean resilience. If his resilience is equal to 4, if his resilience is equal to the damage he took, he becomes staggered. And if he takes more damage after that, he'll give ground. If his resilience is less than the damage, in this case, less than or equal to 3, he's going to take a wound. I'll talk about giving ground and staggering in just a moment. So just to run through, the PC rolls his attack, he gets 2 successes. The target rolls his defense, he gets 1 success. The PC got more successes, so he hits. His weapon strength is 3. He's going to add any successes he got above the enemy to his damage. In this case, let's imagine that he's fighting a brigand with defense 4 or resilience 4. The brigand would become staggered. So, giving ground. If you're already staggered and you would become staggered again, you move away 1 zone. You gain the broken condition if an enemy is in the zone you move to. You get to choose the zone, by the way. If for some reason you can't retreat, you fall prone and take a wound. So here's some things that I think are a little strange to the give ground system is you cannot move through enemies and you cannot move through obstacles or difficult terrain. I've read through the rules thoroughly, unless there's a rule missing somewhere, and I've done searches of the text looking to see if there's any way to prevent enemy movement from moving through your zone, and it appears that there's not. And you can see in the official example, B is broken and has to run away. Well, he's running out of a zone with obstacles, and he's running into a zone with obstacles. I mean, technically, he's moving through obstacles in difficult terrain. He is running out of a zone with an enemy. So technically, he's moving through an enemy. And we know he can move into a zone with enemies because he'll gain the broken condition. So the best I have been able to figure out is this is to address narrative situations. Generally, a room is its own zone. So maybe there's a situation where an enemy is blocking the door. Like you have an enemy that says, I am standing in the doorway, preventing anybody from passing. I think that would be relevant to this. Or let's say it's a situation where the enemies can cut off your retreat. The last one here, let's say it's a straight path. There's enemies in the front blocking you from going past, and there's just dense undergrowth on either side that is difficult terrain you can't get through. I've explained this narratively to you. So the only way you can go is back up the path behind you. And I guess if I put another guy behind you, you'd be trapped, you'd fall prone and take a wound. I don't know how I feel about this. Perhaps it'll go right on the night, but I will tell you, one of the very first things a player asked me was, hey, I'm ranged. How do I prevent an enemy from entering my zone? And I originally said, I don't think you really can. But let's continue. Wounds. So I've been talking about taking damage. How does that work? If you take damage, there's no hit points in this game. You just roll on the wound table. The, first wounds are pretty superficial, and you can treat some of those in combat. As wounds continue to pile up, so for each untreated wound, the next time you roll on the wounds table, you add a d10. So these wounds get worse over time, and they're harder to treat. They're less likely that you can treat them in combat. So they're going to be hindering your character much more, and it's going to snowball fast. In fact, just exploring the rule set, I had a character virtually dead. I mean, he was completely incapacitated. All somebody had to do was just cut his throat and he'd be dead in the first round of combat. You cannot burn fate to gain lives. That's very important. Once you're dead, you're dead. You can burn a fate, and this is not spend a fate, but burn a fate to negate a wound you just took. So, I mean, technically, if somebody deals the fatal blow to you, you can burn a fate to negate that. But there's situations where it's like, you fall into a meat grinder and get ground into ground beef. Well, I burn a fate. Okay, the machine mysteriously stops or something like that. I don't think those type of situations are going to occur here, because it's like, okay, well, whatever. You negated the first time the meat grinder ground up your arm, but not the next 3, 4, 5, 6 times or whatever. As I say here, eventually a fatal wound will kill you. Minion enemies just die if they take any damage. You don't roll wounds. Brutes, you don't roll wounds. They're just allowed to take a certain number of wounds on their card, and they'll get some penalties as they get wounds. And champions, they roll wounds just like a player. So combat actions, you get one action during combat. Okay. You get the special movement, which is a maneuver, which we already talked about. You can attack. You can aim. Aiming is you essentially succeed a check. I think it's awareness. And you get +1 die to your shot. Recover. If you have a real superficial wound, you can recover from it. If you have a condition, you can remove it. If you dropped your weapon, you can pick it up. If you're prone, I think if you're prone and nobody's around, you can just stand up. But recover is kind of like a catch-all for recovering whatever your screwed up status was. So I put improvise above help, but I'm going to talk on help. Help is you essentially succeed on a check, like say like a melee check, and you'll add a die to your friend. Okay. So essentially, let's say there's only one decent fighter in the party. Everybody could help him for his melee to add additional dice to his check, which might be more fruitful than everybody making their own check. I mean, if you have like if he's sitting here with a great sword, like a decent damage weapon, he's got high strength, high melee, and you got a bunch of peasants around, it's probably better if they just help him on his strike. The players all go together, so you're essentially putting all of your eggs on his basket. And like I say, that's probably more effective than everybody doing their own thing. So improvise is a colossal action. It does a lot of heavy lifting. Any other action outside of the ones I named is an improvise. Okay, so I want to disarm somebody. Argue with me why your skill could be used to disarm somebody, and then if I agree, we'll roll that out and you can disarm the guy. You want to knock a guy prone, you want to push a guy out of a zone, you want to shove a guy off a cliff, you want to push somebody off a bridge, you want to grapple somebody, you want to, the things you want to do, you just need to essentially argue with your DM why a particular skill is appropriate to do the thing, or you just need to ask the DM. You say, hey, I'd like to do this. How do I do it? and you guys should be able to work something out. That, like I say, there's no formal rules for any of that stuff. It's just you and your DM work it out. I'm not sure how I feel about that right now. I prefer to have more formal rules. Especially, if you've played a lot of role-playing games, sometimes you'll have players that imagine things a certain way and they want a bonus for their character, and they can get very passionate about how, maybe they imagine something ridiculous, or maybe they're just coming up with some sophist argument for why they should be able to use their best stat for something completely inappropriate. Not sure how I feel about that one. I think I would have preferred them to just formalize the rules. And that also kind of goes along with the, you can't retreat through enemies and stuff like that, right? It's a lot of room for argument, a lot of room for interpretation, you know. Oh, well, I go around him on the path. Well, sorry, dude, I already told you you can't go around him. For whatever reason, he's somehow completely blocking it. Well, that means my character dies. Well, I guess your character dies. Sorry. All right. This is important. This isn't quite Call of Cthulhu, but it's a game that's largely about investigation. So this is the way they lay it out. A basic clue is a vital piece of information it's impossible for anybody to move forward without. Okay? The basic clue is essentially free. It's just given to the players. The players happen upon it. But it does not necessarily mean anything, and it does not necessarily lead to a something that PCs can pursue. Okay, so the example I've given, and there's other examples in the book, is there are footsteps leading from the murder. All right. On its own, it doesn't really tell us anything, but the PCs have that information. So what they can do is they can continue to investigate to gain insights. Insights are the evidence and inferences gained by the players that require their skill to find. They are not guaranteed, and could eventually turn into a lead. So I've given an example. Somebody's determined the footsteps belong to a human. There's a broken fingernail at the scene, and the fingernail has the same paint as the Duchess from last night. Okay, and the Duchess is human. They can continue to investigate that to figure out if the Duchess had access to the room, if she was there, what was going on. Does she have an alibi for why her fingernail's broken, But essentially, the players now have a lead, right? They suspect the Duchess, and they can continue their adventure pursuing whether the Duchess is innocent or guilty of the murder. I like that they lay this out. I think it was very smart to do it. I think the way that they explain it in the player's guide will be enough for players to grasp it. I have not read it in the GM guide yet, but I can tell you, no matter what they told me in the GM's guide, I think the way they lay it out in player's guide makes it a good system. And I like that they kind of formalized it. They're telling the GM, hey, you're forced to give them the clue, but you're not forced to tell them what it means. But hopefully they will gain enough insights to get a lead, and that will move the adventure forward. I like it. So money, I wanted to talk about money because it's strange. So money is essentially abstracted into money points. You get 3 money points every downtime. All your money resets at a downtime. So let's say I won the lottery before my downtime, and I won, enough for 10 gold money points. but I'm a brass character. As soon as I finish the downtime, it's assumed I spent all of that money in the downtime just living it up, and I'm reset to 3 brass money points. The intention behind money points is everybody can buy 3 goods or services each adventuring, each adventure, each time between downtimes, okay? And they have a lot of little funny systems for carrying this out, but that's just the way it is. It's a silver character, even if he's just buying a, something that's normally brass, like a dagger, it's presumed that he's bought a nicer quality dagger that costs a silver money point. A gold character even buys a nicer dagger that costs a gold money point. And if those high class characters are seen with, say, like a brass dagger, a brass quality dagger, they'll suffer social penalties. And a poor character, a brass character with maybe a really like a sword, he might be the target of crime or some other problem. The idea is it's really trying to push the players to just treat the money points like one good or service. And I think the reason they do that is the a silver character has infinite brass. A gold character has infinite silver and infinite brass. And they don't really want that to be taken advantage of, right? So it makes sense. I gave an example of higher class players can pay for lower class players, but they'll be embarrassed. But an example is like, let's say there is a brass tax to use a bridge, right? It's a significant cost to a brass character. A brass character will lose a brass money point to cross this bridge. So he has to make sure that it's worth his money to cross that bridge. He doesn't want to cross it for no reason. However, a silver character can run back and forth that bridge 600 times if he wants. It's irrelevant to him. And he could pay for his brass friends to cross the bridge so they don't have to use any of their precious money points. There is a social cost to this. They want you to embarrass the player that's paid for by treating him like a servant or having people talk down to him or look down on him. But you can see players might try to abuse this system, like, oh, well, I'm a gold player. I'm going to buy 12,000 swords and I'm going to sell them back for a gold piece each or something stupid. I don't know. You know, like, there's all kinds of crap, but generally speaking, it's not going to do very much. You just got to rein it in as DM. I think you just have to meta and just say, hey, don't abuse the system. It's a simple system. I'm not going to give you any benefit from trying to abuse it. I'm just going to come up with stupid ways that whatever your retarded plan is not going to work. Like, oh, well, you order 1,000 swords, but there's not 1,000 swords here. Or I'm going to arbitrarily decide that every 10 swords is a gold or something like, just don't screw around with it. Just deal with the constraints you're dealing with. Be open with your players about that and move forward. There is a barter system, but there's a cost that is too high to pay for the items you get through bartering, so you should probably just not do it unless you intentionally want to cause drama or cause chaos. All right, that's the end of my show, it looks like. The one thing I'll add is there are endeavors in this game, of course. It's just a Cubicle 7 thing. Endeavors are pretty cool. Endeavors are pretty fun. Not much more to say about it. Classes are relatively shallow. So the only thing that a class really gives you is favorite characteristics. They're cheaper to upgrade those characteristics. a unique talent that each class only gets. And they'll kind of control some of your lores. I should mention lores are kind of a big deal in this game. It kind of represents what your character knows. If you happen to have lore Talabheim, it's just presumed your character knows pretty much everything there is to know about Talabheim. Some of the lores are extremely important. For example, if you want to use a black powder weapon, like a pistol, you want lore black powder. That's what actually means you know how to, like load and maintain your weapon and use it properly. It doesn't give you any kind of skill bonus. It's just you need that lore to be able to do it. I believe literacy is a lore. Ain't nobody freaking reading in this campaign. Because I didn't see very many people that get lore literacy. Like I say, you don't have very much control over your skills and over your characteristics on character creation. Your races dictate your base characteristics, and then you get a couple of random rolls on increasing one or the other. You know what? I say you don't have control, but I think you are allowed to choose, but you lose a starting XP. It's probably worth it to just choose your starting attributes because it's very important, your starting characteristics. Like if you're a melee fighter and you don't happen to roll the +1 weapon skill, it's well worth the starting XP to just take weapon skill. The other thing I would say is starting XP from character generation is fake XP. You get there's 4 things you can do with your starting XP, I think 4. You can increase 2 skills from 2 to 3. You can increase 1 skill from 3 to 4. You can roll on the random attributes table to increase one of your attributes, or you can roll on a random asset table to give yourself an asset. That's another unique-ish thing about this system. I really like assets. But in order to understand the rules, you really don't need to know much about assets. It's just your asset is some valuable thing, like a horse stables. A horse in a horse stables, right? I don't necessarily own the horse stables if I'm a brass character, but I presumably have a stable where I can keep my horse. That's very nice because in like Warhammer Fantasy, okay, I've got a horse. Now I've got to find a way to stable and feed him all the time. No, in this system, it's just assumed you have a stable. Armory. You have access to an armory with weapons. Okay, so, I'm a brass character. I don't want to be walking around with a freaking sword when I'm off duty. I can get in trouble for that. But I've got an armory that I can go to get my sword when I need it and put it away when I don't. Or potentially I have access so I could steal maybe a better weapon or, borrow without asking and put it back at the end of the adventure. And there are all types of different assets. It's not just like stables and things. They do some very interesting stuff. But that's it with this system for the most part. You'll see combat is pretty simple. And the basic rolls are pretty simple. You can usually figure out if you're interested in a system and not just, oh, I want to just reskin Dungeons and Dragons or I just want to reskin Warhammer Fantasy. If you like the roll system. I don't know how I feel about this roll system yet. What I like about this roll system, it's obvious to the players they need to level up. Okay? You're not going to have players like in Soulbound just put 3 pips into melee and then decide, okay, well, I'm a melee character. I'm literally done leveling up. I've got the maximum amount of melee pips. It should be obvious to the player. Let's say, look at this roll example. Weapon skill 2, melee 3. He's lucky he even got one success. Obviously, if that's a melee character, he knows he wants to upgrade his weapon skill. He knows he wants to upgrade his melee. And he probably wants to upgrade him a lot. So I like that quite a bit about the system. But I don't know how I feel about... I have to play to see how quickly players can upgrade this stuff. Because in the testing we did, I mean, it was just like everybody failed everything, it seemed like. It was just, even the enemies were just missing everything. Could it be just luck of the draw? But it was a low effective thing. Like a lot of minions are 3-3 or 3-2. It's from what I looked at, it was kind of rare for the enemies to be like 2-2 or anything. But, 30% chances, I guess, certainly isn't super low. But, these are discrete dice. They can roll whatever the heck they want to roll. And the rolls you see in this example, the only fake roll is the shooting. I just wanted to make it really clear, even though the guy rolled 2 seemingly good rolls in the 4s, since his shoot skill's only a 3, he failed. But these are typical rolls. Like that toil check obviously would have failed. I mean, a toil of 2, you're probably not succeeding. The agility 4, athletics 3, you would think would be a shoo-in. You're rolling 4 dice. You only need a 3. I think he was lucky to have gotten the 2. And that dodge roll still may have failed. His opponent may have gotten 1 success. The opponent is the attacker, so he would have still hit the guy. I think one of the things, this is obvious because I complained about it a lot, is I normally like zone movement. So why do I not seem to be too keen on zone movement here? I think it's because when I played it in Soulbound, there was a defense action. The defense action were formal rules that said you can keep people out of a zone, and here are the rules. This is what they have to do to try to enter your zone if you're trying to keep them out. Or you can prevent damage to somebody in your zone. Like, let's say there was a vulnerable NPC you were trying to keep alive. Outside of using the improvise action, which is, I think, what they intend you to do, there's nothing you can do to protect that NPC. I mean, you could tell him to hide behind a rock, and if he's got a good enough sneak that he can actually hide, then he's hidden. Otherwise, there's nothing stopping, say B, this guy down here who's broken, is a valuable NPC, and L hasn't charged yet. There's nothing stopping these. Actually, there's nothing stopping these Ungors. Let's say they're both alive. There's nothing stopping them from on their turn walking into this zone and just shooting B. L could be there. A could be there. B still gets shot. Or if you're an archer, the bows all have minimum ranges on them. So all that has to happen to disable your main weapon, your shooting attack, is for somebody to walk next to you. As far as I know, there's no way to stop somebody from getting into close range with you unless you're like, I am up a tree. Narratively, I'm up the tree, and they would need to take a climb action to get near me, assuming they could even climb. I'm sitting on a branch firing arrows. I'll give you that. But I mean, just rules as written, not arguing with the DM. There's not really a way to keep people out of a zone, and there's not really a way to keep people from getting into contact with you. And improvise is kind of funny. It's like, well, I cover myself in poop or something like that, and I'm too stinky, so they don't want to come near me. We're gonna do like an opposed, I don't know, charm or something like that, because I'm gonna convince them that I'm too gross to approach. Right, like I mean, there's gonna be a lot of shooting from the hip. And what's probably going to happen is groups will all formalize their own rules based on what worked in the past. Like, so I don't know. Like I say, I'm really on the fence about expecting improvise to do all the heavy lifting and then having to argue out a lot of the zone stuff that's going to happen. Because here's the thing. The whole reason I use a map these days, and I used to always use grids. Too many times I'd be playing a game and I feel like I describe everything clearly, and the player tries to do something weird, and it's like, you can't do that. You can't walk through the wall, or you can't jump off this 30-foot cliff that I told you was there, or you can't do this or that. And they get upset. They had a good idea. They thought they understood the situation, and I point out that they didn't. So giving ground, like I say, these things need to be established that, if we just look at the zone and we don't discuss the situation, the exact situation, there's nothing to prevent you from ever being able to give ground besides maybe you're already prone. Or if I really made it so, like, there was only cliffs. But I mean, there's nothing. You see B running backwards, but there was nothing to stop B from running into this zone with the big Minotaur, other than he's going to gain a broken condition. There's nothing that stops B from running into this zone with the broken Ungor. And if there was a zone under here past the guy that scared B, he could run straight through him. There's nothing preventing that other than narrative. So I think it's cool because a lot of, new players like to put a lot of narrative in this sort of thing. You always hear them like, oh, I want to do this, and this is what I'm doing. And then ultimately, the DM either has to humor them and just say, yeah, sure, I'll give you a bonus for that. And then give them maybe a small bonus. But eventually, usually, they just break their heart and say, hey, it's just part of your attack action. Describe it if you want, but there's no reason. You'll give me a 5-minute description and then you're going to miss, right? But like I say, I'm not sure. I think I would prefer more formalized rules. But I'm going to play the system as it's written. I always like to play systems as they're written. I do not like to start house ruling stuff before I've even seen it in action. It's possible the Cubicle 7 guys have playtested this a lot, and they've never seen a need for it. It's just never come up that it's been a problem. So we'll check it out. So thank you for joining me. I know that was very rambly at the end, but like I say, I have some worries about the system. I think it'll be pretty good. The only one other worry I have is enemies within IDIS. So there's a threat that's going to kill the players. It's out to get them. Um, it doesn't necessarily make sense to me that there's downtime. I think I need to try to grasp better. My understanding was each adventure, the players kind of discover a little more of the plot and they give it more of a setback, but they didn't necessarily defeat the plot that they discovered each adventure. And the idea is if I've got some, you know, you're supposed to have one piece of downtime for each session that was in the adventure preceding it. So if it took me like, 3 sessions to figure out that there was an agent in town that's going to murder me, but that he's employed by like a bigger organization, how the hell do I have three, like weeks or 3 months to just sit around messing around with endeavors when I know this agency's out to get me? So I think I'll need to read the GM guide, see if they have a way around that, or see if maybe I'm not grasping it correctly, or it's going to be DM fiat. And what I meant by enemy within itis is enemy within is a very contrary adventure, and I don't like it. Because they basically say, okay, DM, convince the players they have to get to Altdorf as fast as possible, and they're very, very agitated about getting there quickly. Then you're only doing this to force them into a coaching house and be forced to stay in it overnight and be forced to compete other NPCs for getting a coach. Okay? Once they have a coach, we're going to throw in a small distraction and they have to follow it. Otherwise, they're not going to do the campaign. So it's like, okay, well, what if I actually, instead of just tell the people they have to get to Altdorf, I make them want to get to Altdorf, right? Like, oh, Bertram's daughter is about to have a baby and there's complications. So his daughter wants him there for the birth. You guys have to get there. The only way to get there is by stagecoach. Every day matters. Well, guess what? The PCs are going to have the exact motivations I need them to have for the beginning part. They know they can only get there by stagecoach. They're going to be angry that they're stuck overnight. I mean, Bertram's daughter could have the baby without him and die. They're going to be fighting tooth and nail to get into those coaches against the NPCs. That's the exact mood you want. But guess what happens as soon as they get on the coaches? A minor distraction comes up that maybe possibly if the players commit some crazy scam and don't get suspicious about the obvious trap and go in the complete opposite direction of Altdorf for a few weeks, they might get a reward. And if they don't do that, that's the end of the campaign. It's just like, I don't know. I'm kind of worried some of that might happen here, but I think it'll be up to the adventure writers and me as the game runner to not let that happen. Anyway, it's been fun, and I hope y'all have a good afternoon. I hope this was at least somewhat insightful in how this system works.